Yeah.
So in this video, we are going to be looking at this example, and this is the quadratic function that I have here. Y is equal to 2x squared minus 4x plus 4, and I want to sketch this graph. So remember the four basic things that we need to know. The first thing is where the graph cuts the y-axis. The second thing is where the graph cuts the x-axis. And the third thing is the shape of the graph, and the fourth thing is the turning point, or the stationary point of the graph. So in this video, we're going to be looking at the last two things in that list, which are the shape of the graph and the turning point of the graph. Now, if you want to know the shape of the graph, it's actually very simple. All you have to do is to go to your quadratic equation and then look at the coefficient of the x squared term. And then you decide on whether that coefficient is positive or negative. In this case, the coefficient of the x squared term is positive 2. So because 2 is positive, the graph is happy, the graph is positive, so the graph is smiling. So therefore, the graph is going to have a minimum point. The graph is going to have a minimum point, and this is what we have here. A is equal to positive 2, B is positive 2. So A is positive 2, so it's a smiley face, so the graph has a minimum point. The graph has a minimum point. So basically, the graph is going to look something like this. It has a minimum point. It's smiling. It's a smiley face because the coefficient of x squared is positive. So that's it. That's all you have to do to decide on the shape of the graph. If this was negative 2, the graph would be sad because it's negative, and then it would go the other way around. Now, the second thing that we need to decide on is the turning point, or the stationary point, which is this point here, the point where the graph turns. Now, in order for you to do that, you need to complete the square. In the first two videos, we learned how to complete the square for a quadratic function. So after completing the square, there's another rule or another step that you need to know. The thing that you need to know is that in general, any quadratic function can be expressed in this form. Remember this form, guys. I can't tell you anything else but to simply remember this form. Remember this. This should be at your fingertips. You need to remember this. Any quadratic function can literally be expressed in the form of y is equal to a multiplied by x minus h. This minus is very important. Minus h squared plus k, where your a is this right here, this 2, and then your negative h is this right here, which is this negative 1, and then your k is this one here. Always, even if this was positive 1, this negative is there. This form, you just have to remember it the way it is. Y is equal to a multiplied by x minus h squared plus k. This minus h is important, even if your actual thing is positive, but for this general form, after you've remembered that, what you want to do is you want to take this negative h here and equate it to your second term in your completed square version. And then you want to take this k here and equate it to the constant outside your completed square version. So in this case, we're going to say negative h is equal to negative. So we're going to say this negative h is equal to negative 1. Negative h is equal to negative 1 implies that h is equal to 1 when you divide both sides by negative 1. So h is equal to 1. So if h is 1, the x-coordinate of your turning point is going to be 1. The x-coordinate of your turning point is going to be 1. Let's say it was negative h is equal to positive 1. Then that would imply that h is equal to negative 1. So x would be negative 1. So the x-coordinate of your turning point would be negative 1. If negative h was equal to negative 4, then h would be 4, so the x-coordinate of your turning point would be 4. So the x-coordinate of our turning point is simply going to be the value of h, the value of h here when we complete the square. So then this negative 1 is equal to this negative h, and then we solve for h, and we get h as 1 here as positive 1, so the x-coordinate is simply 1. And then to get the y-coordinate of the turning point, we are simply going to take this k as it is and equate it to whatever we have outside here. In this case, k is 2, so the y-coordinate of the turning point is positive 2. If this was negative 4, then we would just say k is equal to negative 4, so the y-coordinate would be negative 4. So To get the coordinates of the turning point, the x-coordinate is simply the value of h when we solve it algebraically by saying negative h is equal to whatever number is here, and then the y-coordinate would be whatever we get. The y-coordinate would just be whatever is here. Whatever is here. If I completed the square and the number outside was negative 8, then the y-coordinate of the turning point would be negative 8. So now we have the coordinates of the minimum point. So the minimum point has the coordinates 1, comma 2. So these are the coordinates of the turning point right here, 1, comma 2. So anyways, those are the first two things we need to do. We need to decide on the shape of the quadratic function by looking at just a quick recap. We look at the coefficient of the x squared. If it's positive, the graph is happy, it's smiling, so it will look like this. If it's negative, the graph will be sad because it's negative, so it will look like this. And then the next thing we need to do is we need to decide on these coordinates here, the turning points. In this case, the minimum point, in this case, the maximum point. And for us to do that, we complete the square for this, and we use this, guys. Remember this, y is equal to a multiplied by x minus h squared plus k. So you simply solve for h, and you say negative h is equal to whatever is in here, in this case negative 1, and the answer that you get for h is the x-coordinate of the turning point, and then whatever number is outside there of the completed square is the y-coordinate of the turning point. So in this case we get 1, comma 2, so this is the turning point. So we know when we sketch our graph, it's going to look like this, and this is going to be the turning point, this is going to be the minimum point. So the next thing we would need to do is to find out where the graph cuts the x-axis and the y-axis. So these 2 points and this point right here. So that we are going to look at in the next video.
My nose running.